Have you ever heard of a meeting that changed the course of history? Let's travel back in time to the ancient world, to a story of wisdom, wealth, and wonder. This is the tale of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. From the distant spice-rich lands of Sheba, a powerful queen heard tales of a king in Jerusalem whose wisdom was unmatched. Skeptical but intrigued, she embarked on a long and perilous journey, not for conquest, but for knowledge. She brought with her a grand caravan loaded with gold, precious stones, and exotic spices, planning to test Solomon with the hardest questions she could devise. When she finally stood before him, she was astonished. Solomon answered every one of her riddles with profound insight. He showed her his magnificent kingdom, a testament to his God-given wisdom. The Queen of Sheba was left breathless, admitting the reality of his greatness far exceeded the rumors. It was a legendary encounter, a true meeting of minds that echoed through the ages. If you love stories that blend history, mystery, and wisdom, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba, also known as Bilqis in Arabic and as Makeda in Ge'ez, is a figure first mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. In the original story, she brings a caravan of valuable gifts for Solomon, the fourth king of Israel and Judah. This account has undergone extensive elaborations in Judaism, Ethiopian Christianity, and Islam. It has consequently become the subject of one of the most widespread and fertile cycles of legends in West Asia and Northeast Africa, as well as in other regions where the Abrahamic religions have had a significant impact. Modern historians and archaeologists identify Sheba as one of the South Arabian kingdoms, which existed in modern-day Yemen. However, because no trace of her has ever been found, the Queen of Sheba's existence is disputed among historians. Solomon, also called Jedediah, was the fourth monarch of the Kingdom of Israel and Judah, according to the Hebrew Bible. The successor of his father David, he is described as the penultimate ruler of all 12 tribes of Israel under a united Israel and Judah. His reign is hypothesized to have lasted from 970 to 931 BC. According to the biblical narrative, his reign brought commercial prosperity through alliances and trade, but his accumulation of wealth, horses, and foreign wives, many of whom introduced idolatry, led to divine punishment. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam's harsh policies led the northern Israelites to reject David's line and follow Jeroboam, splitting the kingdom into Israel in the north and Judah in the south, according to the Hebrew Bible. Considered a Jewish prophet, Solomon is portrayed as wealthy, wise, powerful, and a dedicated follower of Yahweh, God, as attested by the eponymous Solomon's Temple. He is also traditionally regarded as the author of the biblical books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. He is also the subject of many later references and legends, most notably in the Testament of Solomon, part of biblical apocrypha from the 1st century CE. The historicity of Solomon is the subject of significant debate. While current scholarship generally allows for the possibility of a historical Solomon, the details of his reign over Israel and Judah are contested, and the biblical portrayal of his apparent empire's opulence is considered highly likely to be an anachronistic exaggeration.
Solomon is also revered in Christianity and Islam. In the New Testament, he is portrayed as a teacher of wisdom, compared to Jesus, and invoked rhetorically to illustrate God's generosity. In the Quran, he is considered to be a major Islamic prophet. In primarily non-biblical circles, Solomon also came to be known as a magician and an exorcist, with numerous amulets and medallion seals dating from the Hellenistic period invoking his name.
The life of Solomon is primarily described in 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and 2 Chronicles. His two names are traditionally taken to mean peaceful and friend of God, both considered predictive of the character of his reign. A 2023 textbook described 3 possibilities for the etymology of Solomon's name: compensation or a substitute, the ruler of peace, or based on the deified evening star Shalim. Chronology. The conventional dates of Solomon's reign are derived from biblical chronology and are set from about 970 to 931 BCE. Regarding the Davidic dynasty, to which King Solomon belongs, its chronology can be checked against datable Babylonian and Assyrian records at a few points, and these correspondences have allowed archaeologists to date its kings in a modern framework. According to the most widely used chronology, based on that by the Old Testament professor Edwin R. Thiele, the death of Solomon and the division of his kingdom would have occurred in the fall of 931 BCE. Childhood. Solomon was born in Jerusalem, the second-born child of David and his wife Bathsheba, widow of Uriah the Hittite. The first child, unnamed in that account, a son conceived adulterously during Uriah's lifetime, had died 7 days after birth. It is suggested in Scripture that this was a judgment from God. Solomon had 3 named full brothers born to Bathsheba: Nathan, Shemua, and Shobab, besides 6 known older half-brothers born of as many mothers. The biblical narrative shows that Solomon served as a peace offering between God and David due to David's adulterous relationship with Bathsheba. In an effort to hide this sin, David sent Bathsheba's husband, Uriah the Hittite, to battle, and specifically to the front line wherein David ordered the commanding officer Joab to withdraw support for Uriah in order to have him killed in battle by the enemy. After he died, David was finally able to marry Bathsheba. As punishment, the first child, who was conceived during the adulterous relationship, died. Solomon was born after David was forgiven. It is this reason why his name, which means peace, was chosen. Some historians cited that Nathan the prophet brought up Solomon as his father was busy governing the realm. This could also be attributed to the notion that the prophet held great influence over David because he knew of his adultery, which was considered a grievous offense under the Mosaic law. Succession and administration. According to the first book of Kings, when David was old, he could not get warm. So they sought a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel and found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. The young woman was very beautiful, and she was of service to the king and attended to him, but the king knew her not. While David was in this state, court factions were maneuvering for power. Adonijah, David's heir apparent, acted to have himself declared king, but was outmaneuvered by Bathsheba and the biblical prophet Nathan, who convinced David to proclaim Solomon king according to his earlier promise, not recorded elsewhere in the biblical narrative, despite Solomon's being younger than his brothers. Solomon, as instructed by David, began his reign with an extensive purge, including his father's chief general, Joab, among others, and further consolidated his position by appointing friends throughout the administration, including in religious positions as well as in civic and military posts. It is said that Solomon ascended to the throne when he was only about 15. Solomon greatly expanded his military strength, especially the cavalry and chariot arms. He founded numerous colonies, some of which doubled as trading posts and military outposts. He also increased the bureaucracy. Trade relationships were a focus of his administration. In particular, he continued his father's very profitable relationship with the Phoenician king Hiram Pharaon of Tyre. They sent out joint expeditions to the lands of Tarshish and Ophir to engage in the trade of luxury products, importing gold, silver, sandalwood, pearls, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Solomon is considered the most wealthy of the Israelite kings named in the Bible. Wisdom. Solomon was the biblical king most famous for his wisdom. In 1 Kings, he sacrificed to God, and God later appeared to him in a dream, asking what Solomon wanted from God. Solomon asked for wisdom in order to better rule and guide his people. Pleased, God personally answered Solomon's prayer, promising him great wisdom because he did not ask for self-serving rewards like long life or the death of his enemies. Perhaps the best-known story of his wisdom is the judgment of Solomon. 2 women each lay claim to being the mother of the same child. Solomon easily resolved the dispute by commanding the child to be cut in half and shared between the 2. One woman promptly renounced her claim, proving that she would rather give the child up than see it killed. Solomon declared the woman who showed compassion to be the true mother, entitled to the whole child. Solomon has traditionally been considered the author of several biblical books, including Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. He is traditionally ascribed authorship of the Wisdom of Solomon, which is included in the scriptures of the Eastern Orthodox and Catholic Church, but is considered apocryphal in Protestant traditions. Wealth. According to the Hebrew Bible, the ancient kingdom of Israel gained its highest splendor and wealth during Solomon's reign of 40 years. In a single year, according to 1 Kings 10:14, Solomon collected tribute amounting to 66666 talents, 18,125 kilograms, of gold. Solomon is described as surrounding himself with all the luxuries and the grandeur of an Eastern monarch, and his government prospered. He entered into an alliance with Hiram I, king of Tyre, who in many ways greatly assisted him in his numerous undertakings. Wives and concubines. According to the biblical account, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. The wives were described as foreign princesses, including Pharaoh's daughter and women of Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and of the Hittites. His marriage to Pharaoh's daughter appears to have cemented a political alliance with Egypt, whereas he clung to his other wives and concubines in love. The only wife mentioned by name is Naamah the Ammonite, mother of Solomon's successor, Rehoboam. The biblical narrative notes with disapproval that Solomon permitted his foreign wives to import their national deities, building temples to Ashtoreth and Milcom. In the branch of literary analysis that examines the Bible, called higher criticism, the story of Solomon falling into idolatry by the influence of Pharaoh's daughter and his other foreign wives is customarily seen as the handiwork of the Deuteronomistic historians, who are held to have written, compiled, or edited texts to legitimize the reforms of Hezekiah's great-grandson, King Josiah, who reigned from about 641 to 609 BCE, over 280 years after Solomon's death, according to Bible scholars. Scholarly consensus in this field holds that Solomon's wives' women were introduced in the Josianic, customarily Doctor edition, of Kings as a theological construct to blame the schism between Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel on his misdeeds. Relationship with Queen of Sheba. In a brief, unelaborated, and enigmatic passage, the Hebrew Bible describes how the fame of Solomon's wisdom and wealth reached even the far-off Queen of Sheba. The queen is described as visiting with gifts including gold, spices, and precious stones. When Solomon gave her all her desire whatsoever she asked, she left satisfied. Whether the passage is simply to provide a brief foreign witness of Solomon's wealth and wisdom, or whether the visit is meant to have more significance, is unknown. Nevertheless, the Queen of Sheba has become the subject of numerous stories. Sheba is typically identified as Saba, a nation once spanning the Red Sea on the coasts of what are now Eritrea, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Yemen, in Arabia Felix, although other sources place it in the area of what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. In a rabbinical account, e.g. Targum Sheni, Colloquy of the Queen of Sheba, Solomon was accustomed to ordering animals to dance before him, a power granted by God, and upon summoning the mountain cock or hoopoe, Aramaic name, Nagar Tura, the bird told him it had discovered a land in the east, rich in gold, silver, and plants, whose capital was called Kitor, and whose ruler was the Queen of Sheba. Solomon then sent the bird to request the queen's visit. An Ethiopian account from the 14th century, Kebra Nagast, maintains that the Queen of Sheba had sexual relations with King Solomon and gave birth beside the Mybella stream in the province of Hamasien, Eritrea. The Ethiopian tradition has a detailed account of the affair. The child was a son who became Menelik I, king of Axum, and founded a dynasty that would reign as the Jewish, then Christian, Empire of Ethiopia, which lasted 2,900 years until Haile Selassie was overthrown in 1974. Menelik was said to be a practicing Jew who was given a replica of the Ark of the Covenant by King Solomon, and, moreover, that the original ark was switched and went to Axum with him and his mother, and is still there, guarded by a single dedicated priest. The claim of such a lineage and of possession of the ark was an important source of legitimacy and prestige for the Ethiopian monarchy through the centuries, and had important and lasting effects on Ethiopian culture. The Ethiopian government and church deny all requests to view the alleged ark. Some classical-era rabbis attacking Solomon's moral character have claimed instead that the child was an ancestor of Nebuchadnezzar II, who destroyed Solomon's temple some 300 years later. Kebra Nagast. The Kebra Nagast, Ge'ez Kebra Nagastete Kobra Nagast, or The Glory of the Kings, is a 14th-century national epic of Ethiopia, written in Ge'ez. In its existing form, the text is at least 700 years old and purports to trace the origins of the Solomonic Dynasty, a line of Ethiopian Orthodox Christian monarchs who ruled the country until 1974, to the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Modern scholarship considers it not to have any historical basis, and that its stories were created to legitimize the dynasty's seizure of power in Ethiopia in the 13th century. Nevertheless, many Ethiopian Christians continue to believe it is a historically reliable work. The text contains an account of how the Queen of Sheba, Queen Makeda of Ethiopia, met King Solomon of Jerusalem, and about how the Ark of the Covenant came to Ethiopia with their son Menelik I, Menelik. It also discusses the conversion via missionaries of Ethiopians from the worship of the sun, moon, and stars to that of the Lord God of Israel. As the Ethiopianist Edward Ollendorf explained in the 1967 Schweik Lectures, the Kebra Nagast is not merely a literary work, but it is the repository of Ethiopian national and religious feelings. It has been described as an Abyssinian politico-religious epic and medieval-era mythology. Nadia Nur Hussein wrote that the Kebra Nagast gave textual authority to a then newly articulated mythology of Abyssinia's long imperial history, legitimizing a Solomonic dynasty that claimed to reach back 3,000 years earlier to the union of King Solomon and the supposedly Ethiopian Queen of Sheba. It enabled the overthrow of the Zagwe dynasty. Ge'ez, or Ge'ez, IPA, Ge'ariz, and sometimes referred to in scholarly literature as Classical Ethiopic, is an ancient South Semitic language. The language originates from Abyssinia, what is now Ethiopia and Eritrea. Today, Ge'ez is used as the main liturgical language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, the Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church, the Ethiopian Catholic Church, the Eritrean Catholic Church, and the Beta Israel Jewish community. Hawalti Obelisk is an ancient pre-Aksumite obelisk located in Matara, Eritrea. The monument dates to the early Aksumite period and bears an example of the ancient Ge'ez script. In one study, Tigray was found to have a 71% lexical similarity to Ge'ez, while Tigrinya had a 68% lexical similarity to Ge'ez, followed by Amharic at 62%. Most linguists believe that Ge'ez does not constitute a common ancestor of modern Ethio-Semitic languages, but became a separate language early on from another hypothetical unattested common language. Hebrew, the Queen of Sheba, Hebrew, Malkat Sheba, Romanized, Malkat Sheba, in the Hebrew Bible, Koine Greek, Vasilisa Sava, Romanized, Vasilisa Saba, in the Septuagint, Syriac, Mlkt Shbi, Ge'ez, Negeseta Saaba, Romanized, Negshita Saba, whose name is not stated, came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones, Uber Kings 10-2. Never again came such an abundance of spices, 10:10, 2 Chronicles 9:19, as those she gave to Solomon. She came to prove him with hard questions, which Solomon answered to her satisfaction. They exchanged gifts, after which she returned to her land. The use of the term hiddot or riddles, 1 Kings 10:1, an Aramaic loanword, indicates a late origin for the text. Since there is no mention of the fall of Babylon in 539 BC, Martin Noth has held that the Book of Kings received a definitive redaction around 550 BC. Sheba was quite well known in the classical world, and its country was called Arabia Felix. Around the mid-1st millennium BC, there were Sabaeans also in Ethiopia and Eritrea, in the area that later became the realm of Aksum. There are 5 places in the Bible where the writer distinguishes Sheba, Shba, that is the Yemenite Sabaeans, from Seba, Sba, that is the African Sabaeans. In Psalm 72:10 they are mentioned together, the kings of Sheba and Seba shall offer gifts. This spelling differentiation, however, may be purely factitious. The indigenous inscriptions make no such difference, and both Yemenite and African Sabaeans are there spelled in exactly the same way. Arabic. Although there are still no inscriptions found from South Arabia that furnish evidence for the Queen of Sheba herself, South Arabian inscriptions do mention a South Arabian queen, Mlkt, ancient South Arabian. And in the north of Arabia, Assyrian inscriptions repeatedly mention Arab queens. Furthermore, Sabaean tribes knew the title of Mq Twit, High Official, Sabaean. Makeda or Makeda, the personal name of the queen in Ethiopian legend, might be interpreted as a popular rendering of the title of Mqtwit. The queen's visit could have been a trade mission. A recent theory suggests that the Ophel inscription in Jerusalem was written in the Sabaic language and that the text provides evidence for trade connections between ancient South Arabia and the Kingdom of Judah during the 10th century BC. The ancient Sabaic Awam temple, known in folklore as Mahram, the sanctuary of Bilquir Khas, was excavated by archaeologists, but no trace of the Queen of Sheba has been discovered in the many inscriptions found there. Another Sabaean temple, the Baran Temple, Arabic Marbad Bran, is also known as the Arash Bilqis, Throne of Bilqis, which, like the nearby Awam Temple, was also dedicated to the god Almaka, but the connection between the Baran Temple and Sheba has not been established archaeologically either. Bible stories of the Queen of Sheba and the ships of Ophir served as a basis for legends about the Israelites traveling in the Queen of Sheba's entourage when she returned to her country to bring up her child by Solomon. Religious interpretations. According to Josephus, Anter 8 165-173, the Queen of Sheba was the Queen of Egypt and Ethiopia, and brought to Israel the first specimens of the balsam, which grew in the Holy Land in the historian's time. Josephus, Antiquities 2:5-10, represents Cambyses as conquering the capital of Ethiopia and changing its name from Seba to Meroe. Josephus affirms that the Queen of Sheba or Saba came from this region, and that it bore the name of Saba before it was known by that of Meroe. There seems also some affinity between the word Saba and the name or title of the kings of the Ethiopians, Sabako. The Talmud, Bava Batra 15b, insists that it was not a woman but a kingdom of Sheba, based on varying interpretations of Hebrew MLKT that came to Jerusalem. Baba Bathra 15b. Whoever says Malkath Sheba, 1 Kings X1, means a woman is mistaken. It means the kingdom, Malkut, of Sheba. This is explained to mean that she was a woman who was not in her position because of being married to the king, but through her own merit. The most elaborate account of the queen's visit to Solomon is given in the Targum Sheni to Esther. Ahupo informed Solomon that the kingdom of Sheba was the only kingdom on earth not subject to him, and that its queen was a sun worshipper. He thereupon sent it to Ketor in the land of Sheba, with a letter attached to its wing commanding its queen to come to him as a subject. She thereupon sent him all the ships of the sea, loaded with precious gifts, and 6,000 youths of equal size, all born at the same hour and clothed in purple garments. They carried a letter declaring that she could arrive in Jerusalem within 3 years, although the journey normally took 7 years. When the queen arrived and came to Solomon's palace, thinking that the glass floor was a pool of water, she lifted the hem of her dress, uncovering her legs. Solomon informed her of her mistake and reprimanded her for her hairy legs. She asked him 3, Targum Sheni to Esther 1:3, or according to the Midrash, Provener Sadr 6 Yalktharitu, Pararf 1085, Midrash HaHefez, more riddles to test his wisdom. A Yemenite manuscript entitled Midrash HaHefez gives 19 riddles, most of which are found scattered through the Talmud and the Midrash, which the author of the Midrash HaHefez attributes to the Queen of Sheba. Most of these riddles are simply Bible questions, some not of a very edifying character. The 2 that are genuine riddles are: without movement while living, it moves when its head is cut off, and produced from the ground, man produces it, while its food is the fruit of the ground. The answer to the former is a tree, which when its top is removed can be made into a moving ship. The answer to the latter is a wick. The rabbis who denounce Solomon interpret 1 Kings 10:13 as meaning that Solomon had criminal intercourse with the Queen of Sheba, the offspring of which was Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the temple. According to others, the sin ascribed to Solomon in 1 Kings 11:7 secure is only figurative. It is not meant that Solomon fell into idolatry, but that he was guilty of failing to restrain his wives from idolatrous practices, Shabiner 56b. The alphabet of Sirach states that Nebuchadnezzar was the fruit of the union between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. In the Kabbalah, the Queen of Sheba was considered one of the queens of the demons and is sometimes identified with Lilith, first in the Targum of Job, 115, and later in the Zohar and the subsequent literature. Christianity. The New Testament mentions a queen of the south, Greek, Basilissa Notu, Latin, Regina Austri, who came from the uttermost parts of the earth, that is, from the extremities of the then-known world, to hear the wisdom of Solomon, Mac 1242, Lake 1131. The mystical interpretation of the Song of Songs, which was felt as supplying a literal basis for the mystical interpretation of the Song of Songs, which was felt as supplying a literal basis for the speculations of the allegorists, makes its first appearance in Origen, who wrote a voluminous commentary on the Song of Songs. In his commentary, Origen identified the bride of the Song of Songs with the Queen of the South of the Gospels, that is, the Queen of Sheba. Others have proposed either the marriage of Solomon with the Pharaoh's daughter or his marriage with an Israelite woman, the Shulamite. The former was the favorite opinion of the mystical interpreters to the end of the 18th century. The latter has been obtained since its introduction by Good, 1803. The Bride of the Canticles is assumed to have been black due to a passage in Song of Songs 1:5, which the Revised Standard Version, 1952, translates as "I am very dark but comely," as does Jerome, Latin, Nigrosum, sed Formosa, while the New Revised Standard Version, 1989, has "I am black and beautiful," as the Septuagint, ancient Greek Menelik I. One legend has it that the Queen of Sheba brought Solomon the same gifts that the Magi later gave to Jesus. During the Middle Ages, Christians sometimes identified the Queen of Sheba with the Sibyl Saba. Coptic. The story of Solomon and the Queen was popular among Copts, as shown by fragments of a Coptic legend preserved in a Berlin papyrus. The Queen, having been subdued by deceit, gives Solomon a pillar on which all earthly science is inscribed. Solomon sends one of his demons to fetch the pillar from Ethiopia, whence it instantly arrives. In a Coptic poem, Queen Yasaba of Cush asks riddles of Solomon. Ethiopian. The most extensive version of the legend appears in the Kibra Nagast, Glory of the Kings, the Ethiopian national saga, translated from Arabic in 1322. Here Menelik I is the child of Solomon and Makeda, the Ethiopic name for the Queen of Sheba. She is the child of the man who destroys the legendary snake king Arwi, from whom the Ethiopian dynasty claims descent to the present day. While the Abyssinian story offers much greater detail, it omits any mention of the queen's hairy legs or any other element that might reflect on her unfavorably. Based on the Gospels of Matthew, Matthew 12:42, and Luke, Luke 11:31, the Queen of the South is claimed to be the Queen of Ethiopia. In those times, King Solomon sought merchants from all over the world in order to buy materials for the building of the temple. Among them was Tamrin, great merchant of Queen Makeda of Ethiopia. Having returned to Ethiopia, Tamrin told the queen of the wonderful things he had seen in Jerusalem and of Solomon's wisdom and generosity, whereupon she decided to visit Solomon. She was warmly welcomed, given a palace for dwelling, and received great gifts every day. Solomon and Makeda spoke with great wisdom, and instructed by him, she converted to Judaism. Before she left, there was a great feast in the king's palace. Makeda stayed in the palace overnight, after Solomon had sworn that he would not do her any harm, while she swore in return that she would not steal from him. As the meals had been spicy, Makeda awoke thirsty at night and went to drink some water, when Solomon appeared, reminding her of her oath. She answered, "Ignore your oath, just let me drink water."